What's up, Silencer Freaks? Thanks for tuning in. I want to do something a little bit different than what we usually do. Instead of me just building this can and, showing a little diagram of how I did it and going out and shooting it, I kind of want to make something a little more substantive. So you guys have really been asking for a shorter build, and I want to go ahead and do that. Some of you have also been wanting to see a modular build. So I want to incorporate the two together and actually build the can basically with you guys and kind of take you through my process here. So this is going to be probably a long video, and I might end up having to break it up into some parts. More than likely I will have to break it up into some parts. But let's just go ahead and start and see where this kind of goes. I'm just going to kind of wing this. So, K-cans are forever, this last year and a half, super popular. And they tend to range from about 5 inches up to about the 6-inch mark. So I figured we would do, or shoot for, I should say, that 5-inch mark. And then, being modular is also popular, my favorite style of modular is not a thread together like this JK can, but instead a 2-module style, kind of like a Dead Air Wolfman or something like that. So we can kill 2 birds with 1 stone here. We can build a modular can, and we can build ourselves a K can. So stamp it, shoot it in 2 different configurations, and be good. So what have I got? Well, I got myself and we'll get the caliper out here. Got myself a short grade 9 piece of titanium here. This one is a barrel shroud piece that I got from SD Tactical. It is exactly 4 inches long, and we're going to be using it as the basis of our Form 1 can. So I already got my Form 1 back for this one, so we're good there. Now 4 inches, why did I go 4 inches here? Well, their barrel shrouds are threaded 14375 by 20, popular D-cell threading. Now, I want to go ahead and probably use the Q cherry bomb mount that I'm popular of using. Now, of course, we can go with the official one from Q, or we can go for one of these aftermarket style ones. Okay. Now, usually I would use one of these aftermarket style ones, but this time around I don't want to, because if you see here, this takes up volume. Okay, about 0.4, a little over that, or no, actually I want to say it's about like 0.379, something like that. Last time I measured, it's about 0.4 of tube space we're gonna lose inside of here if we use this mount. Okay, well, being such a short can that we're building, I don't want to lose that volume. Now with the Q official version, it takes basically the tapered portion here and it moves it outside of the tube. So see how we have all this back counterboard area? Now we're going to actually gain, not a ton, but we're going to gain, let's see here. I would say it's going to be about, so if that's 380, and that is now going to be outside the tube there, we're going to gain roughly about 0.3 of an inch of back volume by switching to this style of mount. So that means we're going to need ASR threads. Okay, this is an ASR thread, 1375 by 24. So this 4-inch tube needs to now get converted. So how we're going to do that, and this is why I chose a 4-inch tube instead of a 5-inch tube, we're going to need this ASR adapter, okay? And this is nothing more than just a conversion piece that will take one type of thread to another type of thread. No different than converting threads underneath your sink. It just happens to be made of titanium. So what this is going to do here is it's going to thread in to our tube, and now our 4-inch tube is no longer 4 inches. How long is it? Let's find out. It brought it to 4.8 inches. So now we have 4.8 inch tube to work with. Plus we're picking up a little of extra volume inside of here. So we're basically getting ourselves a 5-inch build. And voila, just like that. All right. Now, like I said, we're also going to be doing a modular section. This modular section is nothing more than a piece of pipe that's threaded on both ends as well, made of titanium. That is two inches long. Then I've got, and there's a couple different ways you can go about this. You can buy or make a piece of pipe where there's a male thread on this end, and actually I can grab one and show you, and that's all right. I think you guys know, you've seen them before. However, a lot of times they don't come with the center board out all the way. So I'm going to do something a little different this time, and I've got myself this thread adapter. And this is nothing more than the exact same thread, but male to male on each end. And what I plan to do here is weld this in permanently to my little 2-inch tube. And what's kind of nice about this is now that adds a step in there that my cones can rest on. Okay? Now you can see how thick this sucker is. I'm going to throw this on the lathe, and we're definitely going to be pulling out quite a bit of material. And I will show it to you guys when I'm done. I'm also, and of course you don't have to, but devil's in the details. You can tell that this one is also pretty thick. And I've already done the math here. I'm going to go ahead and make it so my thinnest point is 50 thou thick, which means I'm going to be taking off roughly 30 thou per side here. So my depth of cut's going to be 30 thou, and I'm, just going to be getting rid of some of this excess material. So I'm going to go do that real quick, and then we'll come back here. I'll show you the end result, and we will start with a graph and drawing a graph and kind of looking at what we have internal wise for space and volume, and we'll start planning this can out together. So give me just a minute. Okay. Through the power of editing and movie magic, lathe work is now completed. Like I said, we pulled out a 30 thou depth of cut from in our ASR adapter. Much better. And I ended up pulling 90 thou depth of cut out of our coupler. So much better. This thing was thick as heck. So there we have it. Now we are ready to start actually planning our build. I'm going to be using a rimless cap. This is a white trash tactical one. I like a rimless because, you know, if our spacers or our skirts settle at all, or our math is slightly off by, say, 10 thou, it's no big deal. You know, the cap can vary that little bit, especially since we're going to be doing a modular style can. You know, the depth I might need perfectly, you know, when I go to, say, this setup to this setup, you know, it might be off a couple thou. And instead of me trying to have to sit here and really get it dead on nuts perfect, we can just go to a rimless cap and have ourselves a little bit of a safety net, I guess you could call it. All right, so since we're not going to be using this mount, we can cast it aside. And we can move on to basically, what do we want to put inside this thing? So, coming off of our success with the PPA Super Dupers and success with the Dinos, I kind of always had it in my head that the two could work in tandem together very well. Because of the big pocket and the long, you know, kind of longer cone face here, I think that's going to make a good blast chamber baffle. Where the Dinos are a bit shorter and don't have as much of a spacing, what's the word, restriction, I guess you could say, because we can't space the PPA Super Dupers as tight because of that pocket and that bigger flat style shoulder. We'll make better cones, possibly, for the post half of the stack. If you've ever gotten a chance to look at, I think I did one post and write up where I talked a bit about what goes on in a can and what specifically goes on in a blast chamber. I go off of the proponent that, and then we'll draw a can here, and let's just draw a PPA Super Duper. So you like that. We got our pocket here, and of course this isn't like the scale or anything. And we got our face of the cone here, and we got our angle here, and this is our blast chamber. And say here's our mount, you know, and here's our brake, and here's the opening of the brake. That we've got a strong core, main core of dense gas, but we also have a big plume that, you know, is expanding and coming off of it. But what's already going on inside here is we also have ambient gas. I mean, there's just natural air in the air. And that all has to kind of go somewhere. So if you have looked at some of the studies that I've looked at, it has a tendency, at least from some strong computer modeling and things of that nature, to get pushed into the corners. And here we'll switch to blue. So we'll call blue, you know, kind of the gas that was already in the can. And then red is the nice hot gas coming out. And this hot gas has a tendency to kind of push, you know, the ambient gas into the corners. But then also when it hits the cone and gets stripped away, it has to go somewhere. So it's going to go down into these corners. That's just how a can works. That's how a suppressor works, okay? Now with the big pockets here or shoulders, either one, this gives a chance for this gas, instead of collecting here and then compressing and stopping the flow of more getting here, if we can get it to go kind of out of the way and get out of the way and kind of curve back, well, then we can get more stripped off. So that's my basis of thinking whenever I do anything in a can is this kind of model here. So, assuming we have enough space between the tip and tip here, and we have the right geometry here, you know, we can even get some of this gas to possibly come back and push on the flow coming out, and you know, that can pick up at maybe a dB or two. So, devil is always in the details. Now, with these deep pockets, which is why I'm thinking I want to use this style of cone, you know, we have more space here for that ambient gas and some of this incidence gas being the gas coming out of the brake, to kind of collect and compress down into the pockets and still have all this length of face of the cone to kind of do this loopity-doop and vortice out of the way. So now it does this also with a Dino cone, and it, you know, can do it with even something, you know, kind of like this Reardon cone. However, I feel like this bigger pocket area and this bit longer face over the Dino will help more in our blast chamber area. Now, being it's also a bit taller, we may consider, you know, depending on the brake we use, having to use a bit bigger blast chamber. But being we're doing a K-can, we don't have a lot of real estate to work with. So the thing about K-cans isn't so much about maximizing all the different parts of your can like we can do with an 8 or 9 or 10-inch can, where we got tons of real estate. We can make the perfect BC for our application. We can make the perfect distal area for our application. Then we can go and we still have all this volume in between that we can stuff and move cones around and do with. Unfortunately, with a K-can, we have very little real estate to go with. So we're going to have to go with minimums instead of maximums. So we're going to have to really focus on, you know, what is the minimum size BC we can probably get away with without sacrificing too many cones being lost. Okay? So now that we've got that out of the way, here's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking 1 PPA Super Duper. Okay? It's got geometry I like. It's tall, but not too tall either. Followed by Dino cones. I don't have a Dino cone sitting right in front of me. I wish I did. I gotta go grab some for this build. But the Dino cone being, again, different geometry, when we couple it up against this Super Duper, we'll make kind of a bigger secondary chamber just by the differences in geometry. So that's where my thought process is. So, you know, guys know I love graph paper. I'm old school. I'm not big on trying to model stuff on the computer. I like graph paper. I buy it in this 0.5 square stuff. And I also like to get it in this 1 in 10 inch, meaning there's 10 little squares for every inch. And that lets me kind of draw things to scale. You know, I don't always draw it perfect. Now the thing about this 1 in 10 is it's hard for you guys to see on the camera. So we're gonna go ahead and model this thing up on the 1/2 inch stuff. And again, we don't have to necessarily get to scale, but it is kind of nice to have a gauge here for y'all. So let's go ahead and just, you know, let's draw what we got in. Now that we've got our ASR adapter done, we can just go ahead and attach it to the tube, and now this basically just becomes, this is our tube, you know. Think of it as one piece now. So we'll get an exact measurement on that because I don't remember what it was. 4.8. Okay, so, and that's 1.5 inch diameter. So 3 boxes down, that's 1.5, and 4.8 inches. Well, 4 inches times 2 is 8 boxes. The 0.8 is going to be, a box and a half, roughly. So that's 9.5 boxes. You know what? I should do it farther to the left, or we're gonna run out of room possibly. So we'll go 2, 3, 2, 3, 4, and roughly a half. Okay, so we're going to call this 4.8 inches. All right, so just like any other build, we fill in what we got. So, if this is our tube here, this is the mount we've chosen. So let's fill it in. We can, since we're kind of going to scale here, we can kind of put it here and kind of see where it's going to go. About right there. We'll go ahead and measure the part that goes into the tube. And that is going to be roughly 0.538. So, all right, I'll put my lines, get my little ruler here. We'll call this 0.538 inches. Now remember that it is backboard, so we're going to pick up some free volume that will add to our blast chamber figure. I got 335. So if I go backwards with my 335, we'll basically call this part the thread. And we'll call that 335 up there, okay? So we have 335 of volume already for our blast chamber. Just from our mount, we've got 538 of total length on our mount. And we know that this is hollow and that this part is not hollow. That is going to be the part that the brake occupies. All right. Now, let's talk about the other end of the can. We've got our adapter thingy that I've now dropped on the floor somewhere. God knows where it's gone. Of course, it rolled as far away as possible, but we got it back here, and we'll go ahead and thread it in to our second little node there, and let's get a total length on it. So including the threaded area, we're at 2.47, we'll call that 6. So that is going to go just like that in there, okay? So that threaded area, we're going to need to measure. And we'll write this number down, 476, so we don't forget it. Our threaded area is 373. Okay. Lock my micrometer down. So 373 protrudes into our cans here. So now I want to talk about, again, why I used a rimless cap here. So if I would have this module and all this put together and everything's tight inside here, that's great, right? But if I take this apart and I take the end cap off of this and I go to put it on this, I either, one, have to have a rimless end cap, or two, make these two depths exactly identical. Can't be off by any means at all. Now, you know, if you were making these parts yourself from scratch, not too hard. But in the past, I've had, you know, to kind of really overthink that and overcome that. And I figured, you know, this would just be a much easier way to do it by going to this rimless cap. So that is what we're going to do. So now we can take, you know, basically the guesswork, because if you wanted to look there, you can tell that if we were to put them in the exact same spots, that rimless cap's actually a bit taller. So if this wasn't a rimless cap, I'd have to either try to lengthen this piece or shorten this piece. And, you know, I've already got threads here. I don't want to damage. So this is going to be the easiest way to go here. The big difference, though, is we got to make sure I'm going to make sure to weld this piece in, because I don't want there to be any confusion about this piece being a second suppressor. That's a big no-no. ATF does not like that. So, from what I understand. All right, so now I forgot my measurement. What was it? It was 333. So this is 333, right? Let's measure it one more time, because I got talking, now I forgot. Sorry, 373. 373. Okay. So now we can start figuring out what exactly we have between here left to build our BC and our cones. So if we take our total length, 4.8, and we subtract 373, and then you got to remember that we have some volume here picked up from our mount. So we can take 538 and we can subtract the volume side, 335. And that will give us a figure we can then subtract from that 4.8, and we can figure out what our actual length is from right here to right here. So that's a 3. 3's canceled. So we basically have the threads taking up 203, and we have the threads of our other end taking up 373. So 4.8 minus 373 minus 203. So that means we have, once we subtract those, from right here to right here, we have 4.224 inches to play with. So that's not a ton. That's really, really not that much. And we have to somehow squeeze out of that at least a 2.25 inch BC, if not a 2.5 inch BC. So let's take a look at how tall our super duper is. And if we get something flat, and we put it on the nose, we can measure from that shoulder and see how tall it is. So 852 is what I'm coming up with. 0.852. Other part of the equation is we might as well figure out what our break protrusion is, though I'll be using cherry bomb, and cherry bomb is fairly short. This reared end one that I have sitting here is even shorter, so that's pretty cool. That saves us, you know, some hassle. But if you were, say, going to use, I don't know, let's say a Griffin setup, and you were going to use a 3-port break, you know, that thing might stick into the tube a good 1.5 inches, possibly more. It's one of the reasons why the Griffin actually now makes an XL version of their mount, where it sticks, it adds almost, you know, like another inch to the length of the can to try to space things out. But that's why your brake setup is so important, especially when you're going to be using a K-can. You look at like YHM and their like turbo and stuff, you know, it'll tell you, you know, only use such and such brake of theirs. Now they have a little bit of a leg up because they're using a flat blast diffuser. So instead of having this whole cone area to deal with, you know, they get to free up some space by using a flat diffuser first. But you don't get something for nothing, because that then means you have to make your next chamber considerably larger to get that next tip away from a flat surface. So there's never something for nothing in this game. So if we were to look at, say, doing a 2.5 inch BC here, you know, what would we have left to work with? Well, you know, that would literally leave us with 2.5 inches. What's that? 1 3/4 of an inch. I mean, that's not much, and we want to try to get probably 5 cones in here if we can. If we can't, we definitely want at least 4. So, you know, it's a trade-off. You know, if we tried to go, now we can go with, say, a 2.25 BC, and that would help. That's going to leave us with basically 2 inches, you know. So if you had 4 Dinos with 1/2 inch skirts, that's only 4 cones. Now, of course, we don't need a 1/2 inch distal, so maybe we can get a 5th cone in here. So, being we're going to be using the cherry bomb and it's a shorter break, I'm thinking we're going to probably have to just go ahead and go the smaller side of blast chamber here. I'm also going to go to the smaller side of the distal chamber here too. So, you know, we have a little bit of volume in our backbore of our end cap. Obviously, we're going to have some volume from when we go in and we put our secondary stack on. So, I'm not very concerned about having much distal here. So, I'm just going to go ahead and draw in a very small one, and we're going to call it 1/4 inch. So that's going to be our hard end there and our last cone for the short section. So if we take 1/4 inch now off of our volume, that leaves us with basically 4 inches. Okay. So now let's talk, you know, BC again. And let's say we're going to go ahead and do the 2.25 BC. That's going to leave us now with 175 left. So let's draw in a 2.5 BC. I'm sorry, I keep saying a 2.5. I mean a 2 1/4 BC. 2.25. I hope this is making any sense to you guys at all. I apologize if it's not. So there you go. 2.25, we're going to go ahead and call that our blast chamber. So remember, we're getting some of this mount here. And that's going to take us to that line right there. Now again, this isn't perfectly to scale. We're doing our best here. So that's going to put our PPA Super Duper right there. All right. So draw it in. And there you have it. Now, what is our actual spacer that we're going to need here? So, if this whole thing here is 2.250 inches, the spacer we're going to need, since we've got this 335 from our mount, can be subtracted. So we'll take 2.250, subtract 335, and guys, I'm not good at doing math on the fly like this, so give me a second. That leaves us with a spacer of 1.915. So, all right. Okay, so let's recap. We had a 4.8 inch tube. We subtract this 2.250 from our BC. We subtract this 203 from our threads. We subtract this 250 distal spacer, or skirt. We subtract our 373 threads from our end cap / adapter. What does that leave us with? Now we have space between our first cone and our last cone, and that space remaining comes out to 1.724 inches. Okay, so 1.724 inches. We've already now have 2 cones established. So in theory, we should be able to put 2 to 3 more in here. If we put 2 in here, that means we're going to have 3 chambers worth of math. If we put 3 in here, there'll be 4 chambers worth of math. So you could go static, for instance, and just divide this by 3 or divide this by 4, and that would be, your chambers. Though if we were to do that, we divide an inch, that's only a quarter, so we'd be looking at something like 0.3 if we did, 3 more cones. Now, if we did, say, only 2 more cones, we'd be kind of on the big side at like 0.6. That would be okay. That would be a decent can. But being I'm kind of using this 2 different geometry deal going on here and all that, I think we can probably get 5 if I play with the math. Now, here's where I depart, guys. I'm not going to sit here and do this for 20 minutes and play with the math on the camera. So I'm going to go ahead and pause the video at this point, and I'm going to, just kind of play around with this and see what I come up with, and I'll come back and movie magic here in just a second, and I'll go over kind of what I figured out and why I like what I've done. So give me just a minute. Okay, so I had a little bit of time here to play with the math, and I also have some dinos now. And like I was talking about, we've got 2 different geometries going on here. 2 different cone heights, 2 different styles of shoulder. And what I did is I modeled these up on my graph. And this is to scale. And here's my my super duper. I keep wanting to call it pro, I don't know why. And my dino, okay? And, I played with, as you can see, I did, a little bit of trial and error. But more so than anything, you know, I could sit here and just kind of, you know, visualize to myself, okay, you know, especially once I had the pro drawn, you know, just about how close, you know, can I get it before this chamber, you know, these walls here kind of get a little constricted. My goal going from this to this, though, being their different heights, is I get a bunch of free extra distance tip to tip wise, okay? So even though this skirt here, if you see I've got 0.6 written down, the actual tip to tip is quite a bit more. These are 10th spaced squares. So if you look, and this is about 0.23 past the square, so we're 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So we're about a little over 7/10 tip to tip difference here, just because of, you know, the difference in heights of the cones. So we also got this cool little chamber thing going on here. So I'm able to get a larger chamber with a slightly less skirt length. Now this one was drawn to 0.6, but as I look at this, you know, I can see I could probably go up, you know, another, say, 1/10 of an inch forward and still have a fairly, you know, large chamber going on here. I would still be at the 0.6 mark at that point. And if you guys know, a lot of times in my rifle cans, I like to kind of start my progressive ness, I should say, anywhere from 0.6 to 5, typically 0.6-ish to 0.7, 0.75. So that's kind of where I'm looking for. I'm looking to pick up some free distance here and some free volume here without the actual length going on. So what I ended up coming to terms with was 550. So what this gives me, especially since we're using kind of a smaller blast chamber than maybe we normally would, it gives me a bit larger of a secondary space here for gas to kind of almost like a secondary blast chamber really expand into before it goes into admittedly a bit tighter of a stack. We're not going to be able to, you know, go 0.5, or 0.55, 0.5, 0.45, 0.4. We just don't have the real estate for that. So taking that 1724, and I went ahead and I knew that the tightest I can space two cones that are of the same geometry, or at least that I recommend spacing two cones of the same geometry, is about 0.375, 0.4 being a little more preferable. So I went ahead and I said, okay, you know what? I need to make sure I have as much volume forward of here. So I went ahead and I started off with a 0.375 cone drawn in. And I did the math, and okay, I got this left over. And then I figured out kind of, you know, my SPC Pro to my Dino, kind of what kind of acceptable distance I wanted there. And I've decided that I would be happy anywhere from 0.5 to 0.6. So I kept that figure in mind, and I subtracted it from my remaining math. And what I had left over, I basically knew, okay, well, that gives me... I only need to fill in 2 more chambers from there. So if you look even here, that's kind of where I was going, okay? So there's, you know, I wrote down, okay, I got my 0.375, you know, maybe I'll do 0.525 in the Dino one, and then I'd have my 2 other cones, what could that be? Maybe they'd be 424, and I did my math here. I came up, at the end of the day, liking what I got here, which is a 550, and then a 4.4 and a 3.75 with a 0.25 distal skirt on the last cone. With the back bore, that will be on the end cap in the short configuration. That still gives us a decent little, you know, roughly 0.5-ish distal chamber. Now, when we're cans in full configuration, we're actually going to end up probably having a decent sized chamber in the middle of the can. So that takes care of everything for the front section of the can. The 5-inch section of the can, I should say. Now we can go ahead and focus on this second section. So I already went ahead and drew it up here. If you remember, we've got 2 inches here. Our threads are 373 on this section here. So that's what we've got drawn. This is the end of the tube here. So that's why we've got marked here 2 inches. So 2 inches from here to here. Then you've got the threads sticking out. That's right there. Okay. And then we've got the threads that are inside, the portion that we've threaded in. And that makes that little shelf in there, which you can see. So I've represented the shelf right here. And those are little threads inside there. And once we subtract that threaded shelf, we get 1.627 remaining inside this little tube here. Okay, so from like here to the end is 1.627. So then I factor in my end cap. Again, it's a rimless, so I'm just going to go ahead and use a nice even number that was close to 373. So I did 4, because again, it can vary. And I subtracted that value from my 1.627, which leaves us with 1.227 of space we can fill up inside of here. Now, we can put our first cone shoulders directly on that shelf in here, because we've got all this usable distance from this adapter, okay? So since we've got such a long space, I've decided I want to go with, again, an PPA Super Duper. I keep calling it a Pro. I guess that name is just stuck in my head. I don't know why. Because it's a little bit longer. It's got the bit bigger shoulders where this adapter can kind of sit on. And it'll bring, and it looks like this one's fairly tight, so I'm probably going to have to take a thou or two off the OD, but it's going to, I'll take it off. I'll take the little tubey thingy off. But it's going to end up being inside of, pretend it's inside the tube. It'll end up sitting on this adapter. This adapter will be welded in. And there you'll have it. And the tip will come right up there, basically, to the end. So when this thing is all threaded together, it's going to be just like any other can. We're just going to have a bit of a bigger space in the middle, because our tip of our next cone will come to about right there. So that gives us a free cone. And we still have this 1.227 space to go ahead and fill in. Now, again, I want some distal volume. It's just me. You guys know how I am. I always want some distal volume. Some people might not agree with that, but I feel like it's an easy thing to build in. And, yeah, so I'm going to go ahead and just go with 1/4 inch again. So I'm going to take that figure off of this 227. And it basically, leaves us with, what's that? So if we take 1/4 inch from 227, about 25 thou less of an inch. So, 975 thou of an inch of a space now to fill in. So we can again imagine this is a cone here. And now, with that much space, being it's about 1 inch, we can probably just, do something simple, static maybe, to kind of fill it in. So I'm going to do that now next. So again, we've got our 977 is what's going to come up between this last cone with the distal skirt on it and our PPA Super Duper. Now I could try to squeeze 4 cones in here, but I think that's just too much, especially since we had to have such a tight stack here. I'd like some volume in the can, you know, towards the end at least, for some of that gas to kind of go into. So I'm going to go ahead and keep it simple here. And, you know, we're at 977, so, you know, if we make this, especially since we're going to be doing the dual geometry here, if we make this a 0.5 chamber, that leaves us with 477, which, you know, that's perfect for this next chamber. And then we go into this 1/4 inch distal skirt. So that keeps the secondary section fairly simple. 3 cones, lots of volume, and I think that's what I'm going to be happy with. You could try to, you know, stick a 4th cone in here. I mean, if it depends on who, you know, if you want what you wanted to accomplish, you know. But again, the overall, I mean, think about it like this. The overall length of this can, all said and done, is going to be, you know, this is at 4.8. This is at 2. So, you know, we're basically, what, 7 inches? I mean, a 7-inch can with 8 cones, that's plenty. I mean, we do 9 cones in an 8-inch can. So, you know, I think a little extra volume here instead of trying to stuff another cone is going to be the ticket. So we'll go ahead and we'll go with this 0.5 chamber here and a 0.477 chamber here. You could also, if you were wanting to be a little more on the distal chamber side of things, you know, maybe go to a 375 distal chamber and take some of the length, you know, out of this 2 area. You guys are the makers here. You got to just try to make the best educated decision you can, based off your experience that you can, you know, and run with it. That's how a can gets built. You could also, some people like an SPC Pro at the end of their cans. You know, some say it deepens the tone. I don't know that that's necessarily the case or not, but, you know, if you are ever in a situation like, say, in this 5-cone, 5-inch can, where you did maybe want more space down here, you know, you could go to like the Pro, for instance, and kind of play the same game I played going with the Super Duper to the Dino. You know, because of their different heights and different geometries, you know, you can go tighter, but then because you're using a different geometry, have the actual tip spacing be more. So, you know, you can go, say, from this Dino that, let's say it's 0.7 high, and let's say this is 0.4 high. Okay, well now, you know, if you were to go with only a 250 spacer, you now have that, you know, you wouldn't actually be 250 tip to tip because there's a difference in these cone heights. You know, so you would actually be 5.5. So, you know, you can play that kind of game when you need to. There's lots of different things you can do in a can. You'll see it done sometimes. You want to look at a can that's got that is short, and a K can that plays off of variable cone heights and changing up some of the geometries. Look at Echo Machine's 5x5 can. Look closely. The shoulders are different on each cone. He does some different angles on some of those cones. And he manages to get 5 cones in a 5-inch package. Same kind of way we are doing it, but with a little bit better tip spacing by doing each individual cone slightly different. You know, where we're only going to be doing 2 different geometries, you know. So, you know, lots of different ways you can cut this, and, you know, you just got to do what you think is right, guys. Don't, you know, and don't second guess your decisions. A lot of you guys will message me, hey, does this look good? And I'll go, yeah, it looks great, And of course you can do that, but always try to have some confidence in your decisions. Of course, have other people look at them. Maybe someone will see something you didn't see because you haven't been around as long or whatever. That's part of one of my favorite parts of like the form1 forums and stuff. You can throw your build schematic up there. Just make sure it's detailed, or those guys will chew you up, and they can look at it, and you'll get a lot of varying opinions, of course. But if you cut through all the crap, there's usually someone will say something that might jive, and you might make a change. So, all right, well, I think that's going to be it for this first episode. Now I'm actually going to sit down and go build this thing, and I'll probably check in with you guys right before we go shoot it and do a second episode. And yeah, I hope you all learned something, and I appreciate you if you stuck through to the end. I know I kind of bumble on, and this might not be as coherent as possible, but guys, I'm doing the best I can to bring you guys the info that I think you all need. So, all right, we'll see you guys for the next video.